so you know. We'll go ahead and get started today. So I was looking through our material, and if you haven't been there yet, a good place to start is, if you pull up Canvas. So let me share my screen and kind of get going. I feel like I've mentioned this about every time I start class, but that's okay. So, whoops. Can never get out of the stuff I need to be in. Okay. I just got done with personal finance class, and this is principles of finance. We actually are having more and more people added to class because there has been a little shakeup with how we're handling principles of finance versus personal finance. There were some students thinking personal finance and principles of finance had merged, and that wasn't the case. What we've actually done is merge one of the master's courses with principles of finance, but there's only a couple people in that master's course. So for the most of us, it won't have any impact. So if you go to announcements, you'll see there information on our Zoom, our pretest, and then introduction to class video as well. Going up to modules, and then clicking on module 1 overview, you should be able to see all of our course information. I try to list things from top to bottom. And again, it is kind of sensitive. You go in that order. There are times you can skip ahead if you can figure out when those are. For instance, this like assignment here at the bottom, you could do the assignment before quiz 1 if you wanted. There's no material there that's going to kind of crisscross, but I would say make sure you go over the PowerPoints, right, and the material leading up to quiz 1, or you're not going to know what is on the quiz. And then those other PowerPoints and material, from here down is going to be covered in the exam. I've opened up our exam window, and I've been building that exam today, but it's not going to open until Wednesday of next week. And I do that for several reasons. I think the biggest thing is I want to make sure that, you all are taking the test in the right way, the way that I want it to be, at least. I think that's the right way. And so I will say this, like I do hold you just here verbally, right, kind of to my expectation of what those testing looks like. I do allow you to look through your material. I do allow you to look on the internet, and I don't allow you to work in groups or together with other people in this class, or really anyone else when you take this. And that is an agreement that really, I just want you to, when you take your test, recognize, and there's no other formal process for that. But my tests are, and they will grow more and more like this. They're more about you guys being able to, the first test is going to be more traditional, all right, with some multiple choice questions and then some, general response questions. But after that, I really want you to come to some of your own conclusions. So you maybe even have a little bit of opinion sprinkled in, which I like, because then I know it's you speaking. On the issues and things that we get to cover in finance as they relate to probably things going on in our world. Because just like our discussion talks about, there is a ton of material in our world right now that's happening you're going to be able to relate to if you do a little bit of research. And so I'll hopefully facilitate that well and help you plan ahead for it. But I just want to let you guys know that's the case, right? You can use your outside resources, but it's less about rote knowledge. I know this, I know that. It's more about can I put it together in a collegiate way, right? Can I put together these big ideas as I see them playing out in our world? So just be aware of that. Furthermore, I like to put time limit on the test, and I do that so that you don't have all of the time in the world just to kind of peruse through your questions and responses. And this first test I'm building right now is a 30-minute time limit to cover, I think, 15 multiple choice questions and 5 or 6 general response questions. So you're not going to have a ton of time to work on it. And that's the point, right? I want you to actually kind of at least to have the material available to you through here, as opposed to opening up files or exploring them on the internet. And if the time limit's there, you don't really have much time to do it. And to be honest, you know, I went through a 7-year online PhD program. The toughest tests that I took were the ones that were in this format. I have the information, I can look it up, but do I have time to? Well, maybe not. And that's where I need to make sure I know my material ahead of time. So expect that to come out on Wednesday of next week, due Sunday night of next week when everything else is due. And so just understand these things that are due coming up, you know, the pretest, the discussion, personal response to business profession, the quiz, as well as then next week opening, you'll see the psychology of money and its discussion, as well as an assignment about money scripts. And so in this first introductory lesson in finance, what I really want to get at is I want to get at this big idea that honestly, I didn't mean to do that. Honestly, guys, it's less about numbers and Excel spreadsheets and finance related things, this field, than you think. And it's more about gosh, a lot of the psychology things and stuff that kind of we go through in our world. So I pulled this up last class, you know, and I sometimes will have some ideas on things. And, you know, this presentation I give where, you know, you have the professor up here and all these different students in response. In an online class, it's a little different, but know our system. Yeah, I mean, you know, your assignment, that first assignment really is about understanding the field of finance and how what you're wanting to do relates to that, right? So like, am I going to really be, you know, if you go in the business world, if you go into marketing, if you go into 1,000 other different directions you can go, how are those going to relate to finance? Well, I will say one way it will definitely always relate is through your personal finances, right? You're going to have to deal with that on a personal level. And this material in this class should help you with that, at least a little bit, at least provide some pretty serious implications for how you should handle your money or maybe invest it. But also more than that, like it's about, you know, finding out how the system operates and works. And that's really what the first unit's over. And just to be honest, guys, like finance is pretty interesting because the material itself isn't going to be that hard. It's a way to look into the heart of a man from Luke 12:34. Here's a kind of interesting quote. Money is neither my God nor my devil. It's a form of energy. It tends to make us more of who we already are. Greedy, loving, so forth and so on. And so there's this idea out there that money a lot of times is, it makes us, you know, or it's going to change us. And that's not really the case. So here's our textbook. And I apologize if you bought an old, well, maybe not. If you bought the older version of it, that's fine. I have a copy of that with me, as well as the newer copy that I had put and referenced in our syllabus. Each are fine. I do follow the units fairly closely because I do like the way that Herbert Mayo sets it up. So anyway, hopefully you've taken that pretest, because if not, you're a little bit behind. You know, what's the forecast look like? That's really a forecast of things to come. And then this reading, which kind of gets into, you know, what you'll probably, some material you'll need to know for a quiz. I know someone had asked, this link actually will lead you to a website that you have to subscribe to. So there is an example of that in our course files. So look there, and it should look just like this. Okay. Warren Buffett is a great example, you know, of investing prowess, and he's been at it for so long. Very, very fascinating read if you want to learn a little bit more about just how we think about things in this class. That's the perfect one. So what's this class about? Well, here's kind of the introductory lesson, right? This class, giving away my secrets. Really, I want to go over just kind of the basics of the terminology of things that we use. Okay. A little discussion if you wanted to look over those in relation to the Buffett article. But this is an interdisciplinary field. Finance really is. It's something, like I said, you would think that it fits firmly within the accounting mindset. But it's nothing like that in reality. In fact, it's a wonderful mix of this interdisciplinary field, and I really like it for that, because not only do you have understanding a little bit about numbers and how they fit into spreadsheets and lines, but it goes beyond that. It goes into a lot of fields and business, just because of the fact that they are business and finance co-disciplinary. But also you think about like psychology and sociology. There's a lot of issues in counseling that get brought up when it comes to people and their finances. There's a lot of entrepreneurial things that relate to it as well. It is, in my mind, like the best interdisciplinary field. That's why I chose to kind of get into it. And so what does the book go over? Well, it talks about these big ideas, right? Like what does our field look like? And that's where that first assignment comes into, right? Like how are your interests fit into our field at large, right? The review of the business or response to business options. But really, what we do is we work often in the field of decision making, right? Anything involving money must first involve decision. And we have economics, we have finance, we have business, all of those manage decision in a little bit different way, right? Economics actually studies decision. Finance is more about how we manage decisions, and business is more of the action of it, right? That study how to engage in and profit through those things. And so moving on, we see a lot of principles of finance. We need to understand how to value things. Like what is the true value behind a business, or really, honestly, other things. We need to understand this big idea and concept that $1 today is worth more than $1 in the future, which helps us understand more about money and its dynamic nature, which leads us to what we'll be covering in Unit 2 when we go over the tools of finance. And the big idea there is the time value of money. And I love it. I can't wait to get to Unit 2 with you guys here in a couple of weeks. We need to understand how return works and what that is. A return is when you make money on an investment that you have. And there's a little bit of math that goes into those things. Okay. And just an example of that, like what is an investment? An investment is, right, a desire for return. We need a return in our world because we want to see our money grow as opposed to shrinking in value. If you have $1, right, and you keep that dollar for 10 years, you actually lose purchasing power, right, because of the act of inflation, making that dollar worth less than it is now. So you want to invest that money and see it grow. Furthermore, the compounding effect of options to invest in our world, like in the stock market, means that we can see our dollars grow and compound in a beautiful way, exponential way, to make money. And so, I always joke, why is the business world so competitive, right? And there's a lot of different ways that you can look at this. You've got the big fish eat the little fish example. You've got your friend Jay-Z, which I know I'm dating myself with that reference, guys, right? He says, I'm not a businessman, I'm a business man, right? And the truth is, there is very legitimate reason to think that. Matter of fact, my background is in personal finance. All right. But we are all businesses in and of ourselves, and yeah, you can start a business and then it's separate from yourself, but you get that idea, right? Like we are all in the business of business because we actually are all individual economic units, especially according to the IRS, who loves to tax us, right? You can look at the world of business and how they're all merging and acquiring each other. You can look at the Shark Tank examples if you like watching CNBC reruns of that, where they're trying to buy out this idea and that idea and make a ton of money on it. But like the business world is competitive. Why is that? Well, because just a 1% return more can exponentially grow. And that's really the secret to, making a lot of money, right? There's $24 trillion in retirement money, at least there was a few years ago. The difference between investing like $100,000 over 30 years at 8% and 9% is the difference of $326,000 by the end of that time period. And so all that being said is those percentages matter, right? Well, it makes the field high stakes, all right, because you want the greatest return, okay, whether that be in the stock market, by buying a debt through bonds, with the least amount of risk, right? And you will always have risk. Risk is an aspect of the potential to lose, the uncertainty that your return may not be expected, and the uncertainty that maybe in the future I could lose some or all of my investment. Okay. It typically has a positive correlation with reward as well. All investments do have risk. All things have risk. It's just the nature of it. Even your dollar, like I said, it has inflation risk. Okay. And opportunity cost risk to go with it. So if you chart them, they should look a little bit like this, right? The risk and reward, positive correlation if something is properly valued. Okay. So again, guys, what are we doing in chapter unit 1? We're looking at the landscape of finance. That's the goal. Okay. What is the landscape here? And you have to understand these aspects of investing or of finance to understand it, right? That money is dynamic. It's changing. And because of that, we have returns and we have risks, and we need to factor those in. Okay. And for the sake of time, I'm going to jump into the next PowerPoint. I'm definitely not going to get through everything, but that's all right. You'll see we have this field that has its systems and its structures and its highways and its byways as well. Okay. And so this next chapter is about not an exciting aspect of finance, but an important part, understanding the flow of money and investments and the systems that we have to operate those. It's highly complex and it's always growing in complexity. Okay. And that's really what that's about. And so, like, you know, basically, who are these people? What is a market? How does it operate? And things like that. And so, again, I'm going to need to be brief just because of the time we have here, but you can see some definitions of money, money supply, understand the difference between those two. One is all dollars. One is basically all dollars plus virtual currency, right? Like if you get a paycheck from work, that becomes an electronic fund, right? And M2 doesn't necessarily have to send dollars from one account to another. It sends those electronic funds from one place to the next. And M2 growth, M1 growth, we see money growing, right? Which is why we have inflation, especially recently. M2 growth has really taken off. Obviously, we don't print as much money anymore because of the electronic nature of how funds flow. We still say we print it, you know, and it's still ledgers and banks, you know, control and flow all of that stuff from the Fed trickled on down to us, but that's just how it works. So in order to understand this, you do need to understand a few things, right? Like what is an interest rate and how that works. And hopefully by this point, in upper level class, you do understand those things, because all of this kind of flows into what we talk about when we talk about the Fed, okay? And basically what that means is Federal Reserve, you know, has a very important role in our world. As a matter of fact, our federal chairman, okay, just gave a speech today in Jackson Hole, Wyoming about inflation rates and interest rates and the effect of that, those upon each other, and what we need to do, or what they need to do, I guess, to make sure that inflation isn't a rampant issue in our nation. And so, you know, again, there's a lot of this material that overlaps with our real world, but you see a lot of that flowing through. And again, this is a part of the infrastructure that we have, okay? And all of these different intermediaries play roles in those to make sure that markets function, to make sure that money flows freely from people who want it to people who need it, right? From people who want to let people borrow their money to what people who want to borrow money for whatever reason. Okay. And so commercial banks play a primary role in those things. Banks, because of that, are highly regulated. We have different systems that keep them in line. FDIC is a big one, right? If you've ever heard of the run on the banks from the 1920s and 30s, we don't have as much of an issue for that reason, because we've fixed some of those challenges that have come along with banking. talking about different instruments and investment options. There are that. This is one I know is it going to be on your exam because I just finished writing your exam and I ended on a note that has to do with theory. And it's easy to kind of get lost in chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in our book because they're kind of heavy on the, hey, this is the system, this is what this term is, and this is kind of how it's kind of like the rules of the road, when you're a student and you're trying to figure out how to drive, you got to kind of know the basics of it, even though it's not an exciting part of it. And so I kind of sprinkled this idea in to the end of this PowerPoint. Usually I have, a whole class to go over this, but there's a lot of interesting ideas out there in finance. And the biggest ideas, of course, in our fields are called theories, right? They sit upon a preponderance of evidence. And these giants of our field who write these theories, we hope to just kind of, sit on their shoulders as we look at things in the right way. But there's a lot of big ideas in finance that really help us understand more about it. One is the idea of utility. All right. And that's, a lot of growth out of that concept, but one being that basically utility is a measurement of something that is useful or good to be consumed. And so I've got a little, example of that. Typically we see utility change based on people's wants and needs, but also based on their consumption level. How about like Oreos? You love Oreos. Well, if I give you one Oreo, you'll love it. If I give you 5, that 5th Oreo, not so much. How about the 10th? That 10th Oreo, not going to enjoy it as much as the first, right? And that just explains how utility is changing, how it moves. Homo economicus is this perfect little rational, non-existent guy that always makes optimal choices when it comes to their money. They pursue self-interest. He doesn't really exist in our world, right? Because we are all held and bound by the heuristics of kind of what we naturally tend to. That's not a problem. It just is human nature, right? We all wish we were perfect, especially come exam time, but we're not. And so we need to understand that. But there is a rational way of thinking, a rational way of doing things. Economics is heavily dependent upon people acting in a rational way, which I don't know if you know this, but that's not always the case. And the other example I give is just the idea of efficient markets. And I'll hopefully get some time for you guys to do some research on this as well, because it's a big cornerstone piece of our field. A guy named Markowitz, basically came up with this idea called portfolio theory, and out of it grew efficient markets. And what this idea was is that over time, the market economy prices things, markets and investments perfectly. Okay. And the example often given is, there's a link here if you want to click it and watch. It has to do with oxen and groupthink, and groupthink sometimes can be bad, right? But it can also be a powerful tool to coming up with the right answer. And so there was a guy, he went to a fair in England, and he tried to have people guess the weight of an ox. And he thought, oh man, people are so bad at this stuff, they're going to be way off. But what he found is, if you take enough people, eventually they get to the right answer. Okay. And that's kind of a little bit how efficient markets work. There might be people who, I'll take the stock price of Apple. There might be people who think Apple's stock price should be at $500, and some people think it should be at $5. But if you whittle all of those people out there in our world that think that the price of Apple share, like a stock, like the company, right, should be higher or lower, it's going to balance out to where the market is. And that's really what markets do, on a daily basis times a million. Okay, so big idea there that kind of is covered in this class. And so, I want you to understand the theories behind the field and what that looks like. So that being said, okay, kind of want to go again over our to-do list really fast before we split. Next week on Thursday, I'm going to come on campus and do lunch. So you see my face now, right? Don't hesitate to come and say hello to me at least. Sit down with me and ask questions if you want to over lunch. I'll be there from like 11:30 to 12, well, 11:45 to 12:30 probably. And of course, just like these videos, I would love for you to visit to watch them and or in real time come to class. But same idea with coming to lunch. I just want to make sure that I'm available and here for you guys as you have questions and things arise. So for the few of us here, do you guys have any questions? Nico.
Yep.
Hello. What's up?
Are we gonna meet like this every week, sorry?
So not next week. Next week I'll do lunch on campus instead. Maybe the week after. We'll see.
And also like about the pretest and the assignments, I knew that we had to do it, but on my Canvas it didn't show up anything to do. So as an assignment. So I don't know if I have to like go to specific to our class and put the assignments, or will pop ups in the assignments that go with all the classes.
Yeah, so I'm sharing my screen here. Like if you go under the assignments page, okay, they should be listed. So, go back in there today. I mean, maybe there's a chance that you had checked a little bit before I put all this material in. But it should be there. Or if you go under, grades, you should be able to, it shows scores there. You should be able to see some, all the material there that's going to be graded as well. So yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't be popping up for you. If you go under the modules page as well, click under that overview, be able to see all the things and access all this information as well. But I know some people are getting it done because I've seen it show up there under the grade book.
If you're talking about the to-do tab, it doesn't show up, I think, because it's due next week instead of this week. So it might not be in that time frame.
Thank you, Zachary. That might be a good point. So if you didn't catch that, these are like 4 modules in this class. So you're given 2 weeks to complete the module, Nick. So there's a chance maybe it's not showing up on your to-do list or to-do tab because it's not due this week.
All right.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And if anybody has any other questions, you're more than welcome to ask.